From time to time, events happen in the world that change our daily lives. One of them is the spread of the terrible epidemic. Europe and Asia fell victim to a terrible plague. It was the plague known as the Black Death. So today we hope to bring information about Black Death in this video. Stay with us.
Why was this plague called the Black Death? No one used the term Black Death at the time of the plague. Contemporaries called it the Great Plague. In fact, the term Black Death did not come into use until the mid-16th century. Another popular misconception is that the term Black Death refers to the blacking of the skin with the disease. But black has been used as a term used to express the danger of the disease. The outbreak of the epidemic has taken place in Central Asia, but it was later discovered that the pathogen responsible for the plague was present in Europe as early as 3000 BC. Somehow, the disease that was spreading in China got infected by the Mongols. Maddened by the invading thirst, they started traveling to Europe along the Silk Road, taking the disease with them. In 1347, they arrived in Crimea. They raided the Genoese trading city of Kaffa on the Black Sea coast. But by this time, Mongol soldiers started dying on the unknown disease. Therefore, the number of soldiers of Mongol gradually decreased. The other soldiers, who were very weak, were reluctant to make the usual raids. The Kaffa raid failed, and the Kang Janibek, the commander of the Mongol army, had a cruel idea that changed world history. Whatever disease crippled the army, it must have been fatal. Thinking that it would cripple the enemy as it has crippled the Mongol army, Janibek decided to start biological warfare. After that, the Mongols used catapults to throw the bodies of soldiers who died of disease inside the fortress of Kaffa city. After that, Janibek gave a week's leave to his army, who were tired from long battles and sufferings from sickness. The corpses were thrown from above and fell into the middle of the fort. No one in the fort came forward to touch or approach the mutilated corpses. Even if people don't come forward, rats willingly come forward and perform their duties well. Rats infected by the corpses ran free throughout the city. In 2 days, city was sick. Wealthy businessmen and Italian soldiers who had been sent to protect Italy boarded the ships with the plague, not along with the infected rats. In October 1347, 12 ships from the Crimea anchored in the port of Messina in Sicily. Within a week, the whole of Sicily is sick and falling apart. Not long after Messina was struck, the Black Death reached Marseilles, Paris and Germany by 1348, followed by Spain, England and Norway in 1349, and Eastern Europe by 1350. By 1350, the Black Death, which also spread in Russia, had taken control of all but a few small towns in Europe. Never before or since in history could any emperor make a such rapid invasion, and the whole of Europe became a graveyard within a few years. In the early stage of the epidemic, the dead were often buried in mass graves, but the rapid spread gradually increased the rate of death. In the end, no one can find a person strong enough to stand upright in any city. Fear spread faster than the plague. Frightened, healthy people did everything they could to avoid illness. Some doctors refused to see patients. The priests refused to perform the last rites. Because of this, people were afraid that they would suffer a spiritual death as well as a physical death. Shopkeepers closed their shops. Frightened people left the cities and fled to the countryside. But even from that, they could not get rid of diseases. The disease also spread wherever they went. The villages were disastered and the fields were buried. The church also lost many priests who were knowledgeable in the society at that time. The disease spread not only to humans but also cows, sheep, pigs, goats, and chickens from rats. Not understanding the biological fact of the disease, the majority believed that the Black Death to be a punishment from God. They saw it as a divine punishment given by God for man's sins. People turned to patron saints such as Saint Rod, Saint Sebastian, or to the Virgin Mary, or joined processions of flagellant, whipping themselves with nail-embedded scourges, and incanting hymns and prayers as they passed from town to town. In the years 1348-1349, a number of Jews were burned. The killers had realized that Jews were less susceptible to the plague than their neighbors. The reason may be a result of Jewish customs of personal hygiene. Jews were also accused of poisoning Christian wells. Besides the Jews, they also blamed foreigners, travelers, and lepers. Many were attempting to follow the same practice, that is, to completely avoid the sick and everything belonged to them. They thought that doing so would ensure their safety. Some even abandoned their sick and dying loved ones. Many houses became public property. Because the law was not implemented, there were many people who behaved as they wanted. Medieval doctors did not know that what caused the disease and how to cure it. During this period, they used an epidemic dress. The doctor's dress consisted of an ankle-length coat, a bird's beak cover filled with sweet or strong perfumes, gloves, and boots. The mask had glass openings for the eyes and two small nose holes for breathing. The aim was to remove the bad smell, which was considered to be the main cause of the disease. Doctors believed that the herbs counteracted the evil odor of the plague and prevented from the becoming infected. They used wooden canes to examine patients without touching them. Amidst the behavior of the doctors and fleeing from the disease, there were also people who sacrificed their lives to Black Death to save people's life. Carrier of the Black Death. The plague that swept through Europe, called the Black Death, is caused by a small bacterium called Yersinia pestis, and its primary vector is a species of flea that lives on rats. French biologist Alexander Yersin discovered the small bacterium Yersinia pestis in the late 19th century. After a few days, the infected rats die and the fleas come looking for humans as a replacement. It was discovered that the man contracted the disease through the root. The epidemic spread in 3 ways, and until recently it was difficult to identify it. Number 1. Bubonic plague. The incubation period of bubonic plague is usually 2 to 8 days. Patients develop fever, headache, chills, and weakness, and one or more swollen, painful lymph nodes. This form usually results from the bite of an infected flea. The bacteria multiply in lymph node near where the bacteria entered the human body. Number 2. Septicemic plague. Patients develop fever, chills, extremely weakness, abdominal pain, shock, and possibly bleeding into the skin and other organs. Skin and other tissues may turn black and die, especially on fingers, toes, and nose. Septicemic plague can occur as the first symptom of plague or may develop from untreated bubonic plague. This form results from bites of infected fleas or from handling on the infected animals. Pneumonic plague. The incubation period of pneumonic plague is usually just 1 to 3 days. Patients develop fever, headache, weakness, and the rapidly developing pneumonia with shortness of breath, chest pain, cough, and sometimes bloody or watery mucus. Pneumonic plague may develop from inhaling infections, droplets, or may develop from untreated bubonic or septicemic plague after the bacteria spread to the lungs. The pneumonia may cause respiratory failure and shock. Pneumonic plague is the most serious form of the disease and is the only form of plague that can be spread from person to person. How did the Black Death end? Some experts posit that biggest possible reason for the plague's disappearances was simply modernization. But with advancements in the medical science and a better understanding of bacterial diseases, there emerged new treatments. The most popular theory of how the plague ended through the implementation of quarantine. The uninfected would typically remain in their homes and only leave when it was necessary, while those who could afford to do so would leave the more densely populated areas and live in greater isolation. The phrase quarantine, in fact, was coined during the outbreak of the Black Plague in Venice in the early 15th century. Historically, however, the policy was only first implemented by the Republic of Ragusa in 1377, when the city shuttered its borders for 30 days. Others suggested that the plague subsided due to the genetic evolution of the human bodies and bacteria itself. However, even in the modern world, 1,000 to 3,000 epidemic cases are reported annually. According to World Health Organization, although antibiotics are available to treat the Black Death, cases are reported every year. The reality, though, is that there is still much to be learned about the Black Plague and how it finally subsided. According to Albert Camus from Book of Plague, the plague bacillus never dies or disappears for good, that it can lie dormant for years and years in furniture and linen chests, that it bides its time in bedrooms, cellars, trunks, and bookshelves, and that perhaps the day would come when, for the bane and the enlightening of men, it would rouse up its rats again and send them forth to die in a happy city.